الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, today I will be covering the last juz of the Qur'an, and as we know, Al-Qur'an Al-Kareem is the ultimate source of guidance and light for us. When it comes to the last juz of the Qur'an, it has it holds a very special significance. Usually, as we know that the last juz of the Qur'an is one of the shortest, especially when it comes to the length of the different chapters contained in this juz, and also it's one of the easiest. This is why it's the first juz we try to push our children and young students to memorize. But the shortness of these chapters does not reflect necessarily that the message contained within this chapter is limited. It's the total opposite. It's a very significant, important juz of the Qur'an Al-Kareem. Before we proceed to the main ideas discussed within this juz, I will prefer to mention some information regarding the last juz of the Qur'an Al-Kareem. We know that this juz contained the shortest chapters. The number of the total chapters contained within this juz is 37. The majority of these chapters were revealed in Mecca, especially the early stage of the Meccan stage or the Meccan era. Another 3 chapters were revealed in Medina. The longest chapter has 46 verses, while we have 3 chapters with three verses only. The main, now when it goes to the main topics discussed within those chapters, they represent the most important manifestation of the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when we look into the topics. One of the most important topics related to the last juz is the concept of Tawheed. We know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Meccan era was more concerned about changing the misconceptions that the Arabs had during that time. And the biggest misconception was related to God Himself and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we look also into the seerah, we will see that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent 13 years out of the 23 years of his life as a prophet. He spent 13 years making da'wah, focusing on the concept of Tawheed, because it is a very important element of the spiritual life of a human being. He spent his time calling upon people to forget about the teachings and the customs of their forefathers and follow the truth. This is one of the concepts. The second one, also the second teachings contained within this juz, is the proving that the Qur'an is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is also another thing. If we read the Qur'an, the verses of the Qur'an, there was always a dialogue between the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Qurayshi people with regard to the authenticity of the Qur'an. They try to prove that this Qur'an is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a man-made production of the human mind, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took it from the previous nations or the previous people of the book, like the Jews and the Christians. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always sending down the signs to prove that this speech is not the speech of a human being, but the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. Another thing also, which is also very important, is the concept of Yawm al-Qiyamah, and also the resurrection. This is one of the major problem that the non-Muslims, the Qurayshi people, the polytheists had during that time. They don't believe in the resurrection of the soul. They don't believe in the day of judgment. They believe that the human being will live his life for a certain amount of time, then it's the end of the story. There is nothing after that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also showed them that it's not the truth. After this life, there is a day of judgment where people meet their Lords, and they will be taken in account, and everything will be judged according to what they have performed during their lifetime. So these are the most important topics discussed in the Meccan Qur'an, regardless of the shortness of the surah. But if you read it the messages are very, 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 very strong. Very strong, and they keep repeating themselves from one chapter to another one. Almost the same message is repeated for a purpose, is to create this constant reminder about these things. Why? As I told you, because the importance of Tawheed is very, very crucial. It's the most important message of the Qur'an itself. And when it comes to building a nation or civilization, we have to focus on the human being himself by establishing and installing the right perception about the word, about the Creator. Only from that we can move to dealing with what? With the physical world. If a human being is not well trained, he's not well educated, then his achievement will be very, very limited. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ, he of course was taking care of the human capital first, and we can see not the implication but the results in the Medinian era. The Prophet ﷺ spent 13 years taking care, training the Sahaba. When it comes to the Medina, okay, they could achieve a lot of things within a very short period of time. 1 decade, it's not a long time when we try to, evaluate the development of a nation or civilization. It's very, very limited and very small amount of time. The Prophet ﷺ could achieve that only, within 1 decade. Now I go to the last aspect related to Juz Amma, is about the positive impact of studying Juz Amma. When someone studies Juz Amma, since we're talking about short chapters, so the Ramadan is a very good opportunity to focus on the last Juz', especially if you want to get the more knowledge within a very short limited time of 30 days. Among the positive impact of studying Juz Amma, the first one, increasing and renewing the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the last day, to reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to try not to re-understand, because the concept of Tawheed is understood already, but we need to refresh our memory, we need to refresh that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to reconnect, to strengthen the connection, okay, by understanding the real meaning, the deep meaning of Tawheed. Okay, another thing is also the Day of Judgment. This is related to the concept of Tawheed. Since we know that there is a God, one God, we have to know also that this God will judge us on the Day of Judgment, on whatever we have performed during this lifetime. Okay, the good and the bad. The second teaching also, to draw closer to God through act of worship. Okay, the act of worship, we know that during the Meccan era, the act of worships were very, very limited, because the Prophet ﷺ was more concerned about the aqidah, but it doesn't mean that there is no rituals. The rituals were there, but they were commended to the followers of Islam gradually until they reach the end of the Meccan era. Then the salat, as we know it, 5 times a day was become compulsory on the Muslims. Another thing also related to Juz Amma, self-development, purification and revitalization. This is also very, very, very important when we talk about self-development. The self-development can see through the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, especially during the Meccan era, and as we know that the Prophet ﷺ took this Meccan era as preparation stage for the Medinian stage. This is the time where the Prophet ﷺ took his time to what? Train, teach, educate, purify these people who will be carrying the deen in the near future. Another thing, improving morals and performing good deeds, which is a very important requirement for any human being. Why? Because we know that the morals and good deeds are very important ingredients in creating very good elements, a very good human being. Otherwise, he would not be able to perform well. So these are the most important impacts, even though we can mention more than that, but inshallah, due to the time restrictions, I have to stop here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefit us from the Qur'an, not only Juz Amma, but the whole Qur'an, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this opportunity of Ramadan as a very good time for us to reprogram ourselves. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.